Today we have, I'm super excited to have Ashleigh Scully to be here to be interviewed by me. So as you know, I am always trying to connect with incredible guests, incredible minds that has insights to help transform our photography. And today's guest is probably one of the most talented and youngest photographer out there that I admire. She's not only great in photography, but she's also making a huge difference in conservation. So I'm super excited to have Ashleigh with us. So for those of you who don't know Ashleigh, so just let me say a few words, Ashleigh, if it's okay. So she is the Youth Photographer of the Year in Nature's Best Photography, and she also won in Wildlife Photographer of the Year. And her photos have been in display in London and in the exhibit of Wildlife Photographer of the Year, and also in the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History. She was one of the 5 talented teenage girls that was picked by Ellen DeGeneres for the Girls Power campaign for Gap, and she has won awards all over the world. And not only that, she has been instrumental in supporting organizations such as the Wyoming Untrapped, the K9 Project, and Girls Who Click. So, and most importantly, she's only 18 years old. 18 years old, I was just thinking about how to skip classes. So we are going to find out what is her secret to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, so why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're working on now?
Well, now I'm at a bit of a halt when it comes to photography. I'm a freshman at Texas Christian University, and I'm riding on their Division I equestrian team at the moment. And I've had a very packed schedule. A lot of my travel plans for 2020 were canceled because of COVID. My plans as of March in 2020 were to get into underwater photography. I was supposed to be traveling to Australia and spending time on the Great Barrier Reef. So I was hoping to try a new aspect of photography there. But unfortunately, 3 days before I left, the trip was canceled. So hopefully I can pick that up sometime in the future, but I think it depends on what's going on in the world right now. But I had a few other small trips that were canceled. But what I did do was, when I was a senior in high school, which was just last year,
yep.
But I got out of school May 1st to do what's called our senior project. Mm-hmm. And we get out of the month earlier than all the other schools, but with COVID not in the picture, I was supposed to go down to the Jersey Shore and work with the New Jersey Osprey Project and do research and then give a presentation back to school about how marine pollution and plastic and all of these man-made objects affect ospreys and their young and how they build their nests, because I've noticed that a lot of the nests have like bottle caps in them or string or a lot of pollution. So I wanted to see how that affected the chicks and how they grew up. But unfortunately, because of the pandemic, that was canceled. So what I ended up doing was staying at home and focusing on photography. And that allowed me to find a great horned owl nest, a barred owl nest, and a fox den within the 3 weeks that I had to do the project. So I was outside every sunny day for about 5 hours a day, photographing all 3 of the species. But I was able to watch both of the owl families grow up and the fox kits grow up. And I was really glad to be able to get out and photograph around home again, because that's how I started.
I see. So just from, let me just switch the gallery view a little bit. So from just hearing what you said, it is very interesting that you were able to put your senior project to tie with your photography passion to do some conservation work, which is really impressive. I think it is very smart. So unfortunately, it didn't work because of the COVID, and then you switch back into photographing in your neighborhood. So that's one thing I really want to tell a lot of the photographers out there. And if you have seen Ashleigh's excellent photos, most of those were taken all in the neighborhood of where she lives in New Jersey. So all the owls, foxes, and all. So for the longest time, I've heard photographers giving me the biggest obstacles for their photography is that, oh, there's no wildlife near where I live, and I couldn't travel, so I can never be good at photography. But Ashleigh proved that wrong, right? So she didn't even know about this nest, owl nests and fox dens. But just because of her senior project didn't go the way she planned, and then she started to look for them. And then she started to follow these foxes and owls 5 hours a day and got a lot of photos. And for me as well, I mean, a lot of my photos were taken. Some of them I went out with Dawn Quintana to go to Central, like Morro Bay area, and some of them in Los Angeles. There are just a lot of wildlife that are thriving, even in the urban settings, right? And all we need is just to pay more attention to that. And so that is one thing that I want to know. I have some questions too, but first I want to ask you, like, so how, like, can you give people some advice, like, on how should they start to look for wildlife in their area?
Yeah, so I started out really just in my backyard when I was a lot younger, but eventually I moved on and started to photograph in the local wildlife refuges or land trusts or national parks around my area. I would recommend that. I spent a lot of time at Island Beach State Park down at the Jersey Shore. I was at the Great Swamp National Wildlife Refuge, and in my very small town called Harding, New Jersey, we have our own land trust, and that is where I photographed the 2 different owl nests. I photographed a great horned owl nest and a barred owl nest. And the barred owl one I'd photographed a few years before, and the great horned one I hadn't seen before. But I would recommend just going to those local places, and that way I would always meet people just driving back and forth along this same gravel road in the Great Swamp. And I met a lot of other photographers, and then we would keep in touch through social media and just create connections, and they would tell me if they found anything, and I would do the same back, and it kind of just expanded from there. And a lot of people think that, you know, in order to be a wildlife photographer, you need to be able to have the privilege to visit all of these amazing places, and I'm very thankful that I have been able to visit some amazing places. But I don't want people to forget that, like, your roots are always to home, and I started off at home, and some of the best photos I've ever taken are from right in my very backyard. So
yeah, Ashleigh, a question that somebody else asked: what her major is in school right now? What is she majoring in college?
I'm majoring in English. It's always been my best subject. It was my best subject on the ACT and my best subject in high school. And my eventual goal in life is to become a writer. So, and I just love writing. I peer edit all of my roommates' essays all the time. But my goal is to hopefully incorporate some of that writing and then make something photojournalistic out of it. So,
oh, this English talent, how did you develop it? Were you always good at writing?
I mean, I'm not very good at math, and I just think that English has just always been what I just naturally was better at in school. My dad also majored in English, and he's a very good writer, so I think a part of me picked up some of it from him.
I see.
But I switched my major a lot coming into school. I originally had it as environmental science, and then I switched it to journalism. But I'm not very good at physics and chem and bio and all of that. So that kind of steered me away from environmental science. And then for journalism, it didn't really incorporate all of the writing aspects that I wanted. It was a lot of interviewing people and a lot of writing about politics and things that are going on right now, which is just not what I'm really into. So I think I just wanted a foundation of learning how to write really well, and then hopefully I can just incorporate my photos into it.
I see. So instead of more analytic way, you're more into the artistic side, right? How to get more emotional and move people more, right?
Yeah.
Things like that. Oh, that's very exciting. I think some of the people ask if you have any essays or writings that people can see and check it out.
Oh, maybe. I mean, most of my essays are just from school prompts. I do have a blog on my website. I haven't updated it in a long time.
Maybe it's time. Well, you don't have time, right?
I know. I'm so busy. I haven't been posting on my photography Instagram as much as I would have liked either, just because I don't have a ton of new content. But hopefully during my winter break, when I have a lot more free time on my hands, I'm going to go through some old hard drives and pull up some stuff to photograph, and hopefully I can get out to Wyoming too. but I can look through my old essays and see if I can post any on my blog. But
yeah, because it would be great. I mean, like some of your what you mentioned about how you follow the foxes and the owls, right? How do you find them, and what is the feeling, right? Because I've always wondered, and actually people have been asking me, like, what, like, how did it click with you? Like, when did you know that, like, wildlife photography and bird photography is for you? Like, I know you began super young, right? Like, how old were you when you started the
I
love
was
of
8. I was
eight?
8. My grandparents got me a point and shoot lime green Olympus camera for my birthday. And later that summer, we traveled to Alaska, and it was just my grandparents, me, and my 2 older cousins. And we were on a National Geographic boat, and we went from Sitka to Juneau.
Mm-hmm.
And it was still like one of the best experiences of my life. Like, I fell in love with all of the coastal wildlife there. I was always kind of like an animal nerd. I would spend a lot of time when I was younger just printing out pieces of paper of screenshotted photos off the internet of foxes and owls and bears, and then I would write facts about them and create a little book.
Mm-hmm.
And just going to Alaska and being able to actually see it all in person and experience it, I think that really triggered something. And the fact that I was able to capture that and like remember that, I think that that was really important to me, and that's what helped me continue.
I see. Well, when I was young, I always imagined when I was on a boat or on a ship on the ocean, I always hoped that a whale will reach out. But later I realized that you have to go to certain places at certain time, like Juneau, right, in the summer to see that. So so I've always wanted to go to Juneau actually to see, like, those bubble net feeding. Have you ever seen those?
No, I haven't. But on my trip, how long ago was that now? Almost probably 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, over 10 years ago. Wow. And we saw orcas and humpback whales.
I see. So were you able to take that was an Olympus point and shoot, or was it? Okay, I see. And then how was the transition to the more professional cameras? What was your process?
Well, it was quite a process. I've pretty much used every type of camera there is. From my Olympus point and shoot, I saved up as much birthday money as I could to help invest in a hot pink Nikon camera. And yeah, that was a big difference though, from the point and shoot to like an actual camera. And then I used my mom's Sony DSLR for a little while. And then I eventually moved on to Canon and just stuck with Canon.
So when is your like closest, like most exciting encounter back in those days? Like, were there some moments that you still remember, like for like foxes or owls or anything that you can share with us?
Yeah, I actually have one in particular that I just thought of. So after I got back from that trip in Alaska, I started to go crazy, just trying to photograph anything that I could find at home. My brother and I would look for frogs, snakes, and turtles to set up and pose them so I could photograph them. And eventually I started to realize how many foxes were around my area, but they were so skittish. And I would try so hard to photograph them, but my lens was never it was never long enough. The foxes were always too far away. And I would take these nightly walks up my driveway. Because I live in a pretty countryside area of New Jersey, and my driveway is probably close to a half-mile long. So I would walk down, and there was this big field at the end of my driveway where I would always see the foxes. And I remember seeing one on the other side of the field, and I'm completely exposed in the driveway. Like, the fox has already seen me and my cover is blown. But I walked down, and there was this row of trees in the middle of the field that the fox was behind. So I don't think it heard that I was coming. And I finally came around the corner and saw it and took a photo as fast as I could. But just being within 15 feet of it, it made my year. Like, I was so excited. I got a blurry photo of it running away. But ever since that moment, I talked with my dad and I got one of those camouflage tents. And that Thanksgiving, I spent all day in the tent photographing the foxes, and they would they would actually come up closer to me. I was getting like photos that I never dreamed that I would be getting. So I think it was finally realizing that I could get close enough. My birthday this year, I'd like a camouflage tent.
I think there is a time when when people are getting too close to the animal too fast, the animal are skittish, they run away, right? But when you spend your time, be patient, and slowly get the trust of the animal, and when you get super close to them and they didn't even care, that kind of thing, I think it is just a huge respect between each other. And I don't know how to explain, but what can you say something about that? Like, this is a very special feeling, right?
Yeah, it is a really special feeling. And that's always been my goal in photography, to kind of just be immersed in the subject's environment, because a lot of people don't get that experience. And I want to be able to share that with them, just to show what these animals are like naturally in the wild, because they behave so differently around people and when they're aware of the people being there and when they're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I found this to be especially true when I was in Lake Clark photographing the grizzly bears. Like, I felt invisible in their environment. Like, they didn't pay any attention to me. They were going and acting as if they were in the wild and acting as their normal selves. And that's what I tried to portray. And I think that that's the side of bears that people need to see. And there's a side to every animal that people need to see. And I'm guessing it's every photographer's goal to capture that.
Yeah.
But I think that's what's most important.
Yeah, I think you just make a good point. So Dawn, I'll get back to your questions, but actually just reminded me of one thing, because I was talking to the last interview I had was with Federico Veronesi, and when I was with him in Africa, in Kenya, we were talking about that, and because his favorite animal is elephants, so he spent a lot of time to photograph them, and he said, by just looking at a photo of an elephant, he knew if the elephant was stressed by the photographer or it was really comfortable with that. And so, when people see a beautiful photo of an elephant, for him, he sees something very different. And so sometimes you feel sad because you knew that the elephant was stressed, but sometimes it is very difficult for him to express and you confront people and talk to that about that. And I know you probably will know when you see an animal photo that the animal is not too comfortable or not. So maybe this is a very good thing that in the future, if we can have some way to educate people about this impact, especially for new photographers, right? When I was new, I was so excited when I see an animal, and I never thought about the impact, right? If they have a family, if they have a nest, the parents may abandon the nest if they get scared, and all the chicks will die. And a lot of the new photographers, they wouldn't know. And like in Yellowstone, right? People would only have an iPhone, and then they get so close, and there's a lot of accidents too. But I think most of the time people have a pure love of the wildlife, but they just didn't have the opportunity to be educated. And so so
I see that a lot out in Wyoming too, like in the time that I spend out there when I go into Grand Teton National Park and Grizzly 399 and her cubs are out, and there's a bear jam going on for miles and photographers lined up, and sometimes the bears are trying to cross the road, and everybody's blocking them, and the park rangers are kind of telling everybody to move back and everything, but everybody's just kind of blocking the bear's path. Like, they're trying to cross the road and move on. Luckily, they're not trying to cross the road when cars are speeding, of course, which I'm not a fan of, but I do think that it's important that people don't crowd the sides of the roads as much when it comes to bear jams. When I come across a bear jam, what I usually do is I'll drive ahead in the direction that the bear is going, like drive ahead a few miles, and then kind of just like park on the side of the road if there's a pull out, and then just get out and wait. And usually that works out better for me, but sometimes people can lure the bears in different directions unintentionally. And I do think that people being educated on the animal's behavior and their way of life is really important. I appreciate their love of them and that they're actually admiring them from the side of the road.
Yeah.
But I feel like just more information on them needs to be released. And I think that a lot of photographers, like, displaying that in the captions of their Instagram posts and social media posts are important too. because I've just found that social media is the best way to get information like that out.
Yeah, I think it is kind of two-sided too, because I like when you started photography, and also when I started photography, social media was not even there. I mean, when you print out the animals to write reports about them, right? There is nothing about sharing. So, and for me, when I was taking photos, I didn't even know there were any photo contests or anything at all. It's just pure love of the encounter, really, and so. But these days, I think there is so much competition, right? Everybody want to show their Instagram photos, and also it ended up really affecting a lot of the animal safety. Like when you're crossing the road, and like when they're crossing the road, it's just really hurting. So yeah, there got to be something that should be done. And I'm so happy that you have been doing a lot of those work. I don't know if you remember. There's a photo of a great horned owl on the top of a tree, and then overlooking the other side, and then there are some shorter trees, and then you know which one I'm talking about, kind of dark.
I think I do. Is the great horned owl on the left top side of the frame?
Okay. Yeah, and I think I really like that one. I think it is almost looking like he's looking over his or her kingdom, and it has a little bit of sadness in it. and I don't know, like you always can capture something that is quite poignant, and I don't know how to describe it. Like, were you trying to express something in your mind, or like?
Well, I hope I'm thinking of the same photo as you. I'm actually just trying to look for it now, because I'm pretty sure it's somewhere on my Instagram. Is it this one?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, that one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that one was taken super late at night. That owl generally didn't really come out into Wyoming until the sun had already kind of set. So my ISO is very high for that. But just the way that I saw it, like the composition worked out perfectly, just to put the owl on the top left side of the frame, because to see it looking down on what it was looking at. Because I think that for a lot of beginners, I think that the main problem that they have, that I've seen, is that they'll have an animal like looking to the right side of the frame, but they'll have more room on the left side. You know, and I think that people need to show and develop and like understand that you need to show where the animal is looking, because that just draws the eye to more aspects of the photo. And I love that photo. It did have a really moody feel to it, especially because the great horned was more of like a grayish color instead of the ones that we get in New Jersey, which are more brownish and dark. But that photo was taken out in Wyoming. And there was actually, it was looking over a road and a field where there are a bunch of posts where it would sit on and hunt for mice and voles. So yeah.
We just kind of go over a few photos before we get to the question, so that at least people can see what some of your photos are. Okay, so you guys can see my screen, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about this photo, please.
So I took this photo in Prince Edward Island. I was with Amy Shutt and Brittany Crossman, and this was probably the most rewarding photo I got out of the entire trip. I went to Prince Edward Island because they have an incredible population of foxes, and they have a lot of cross foxes. And this was a vixen, and she had a den up on a hill, but we were photographing a den made out of mud, just from like construction mud pushed up against the side of a parking lot. And I guess somehow all of these foxes were related, but there was one mother who was like very mean and would like bark and wasn't nice and didn't want us anywhere near her. But she had the kits in the mud den, and then there was a den only like 50 feet above it. And the foxes up there were a lot more skittish than the ones down at the mud den. But they had a mother up there, and then there were a few kits that were younger. But this mother, I saw her because I considered her like a helper fox, which I think are like the sisters and brothers of the parents that come and help out with the kits, because there were just so many foxes in that 1-2 mile radius. And so I broke off from the group and told them that I was going to follow this fox, right? And nobody had any luck photographing the more skittish younger kits up at the top of the hill. So I followed this one, And she brought me out into this beautiful field on the back side of the hill on the den. And so I sat in the field, and then I watched her go up into the den. And I knew that she wasn't the mother of these kits, but she came out and she brought them out like right, and like the sun was setting and there was this glow on them, and it was so beautiful. And she brought out the kits, and the kits were super nervous, but she brought them out like right out to me. And there was just this like 15-minute span where they were all playing together, and the kits were comfortable, which I hadn't seen throughout the whole trip. Wow. And it was just me and them. And then another photographer came up and joined me. But I mean, it was an incredible moment, just because I felt like she trusted me and she was bringing them out to me, you know. And eventually she brought them back, and then I gave her space, and we were all wrapping up to leave. And I went up to go check one last time, and she was sitting here like this, looking at me. And I just had like another like 10 minutes just alone with her. She was sitting like this. She had the most beautiful coat, and like all of the colors in the background complimented her. And it was just like the perfect ending to my experience with her. So.
Wow, that's such a beautiful story, and from the look of it, it's almost like she's saying that, hey, I trust you, and so that's why I brought these babies out to play with your presence, right?
Yeah.
So knowing this, so I also saw some other another photo with the not that one, this one. Is it also from the same trip?
So yes, this is from the same trip. This is one of the kits at the mud den. So this was a different set of kits, but it was the one right below the den on the hill. But yes, it was from the same trip.
I see. So how did you make the decision to follow this helper fox that time?
Well, we got to a point where the kits at the mud den were only popping their heads out like once every half an hour, and we weren't really having a lot of luck with them, and the light on that side of the hill started to fade. And I was just so struck by how beautiful that one vixen was that I was like, I have to follow this fox. So, and she just, I just like needed to photograph that fox. It was just necessary, but it ended up being really rewarding. But I had seen her briefly before. I just hadn't seen the direction that she'd gone. And a lot of the photographers wanted to wait at the mud den because, you know, it's not very common that you get a photo of a fox kit like this, you know, like a mud den's pretty rare, and it was really cool.
Yeah.
So a lot of them tried to test their luck with that, and then I just went up and photographed the other ones. But yeah.
Yeah. Do you think, well, that may be a crazy question, but do you think that because you have spent such a long time with foxes, and so you got so comfortable with them and their language, so when this fox saw you, she kind of knew that you were trustworthy?
I mean, I would hope so. I really would. That's kind of the way I interpreted my experience with her. Especially because, you know, I kept such a distance from her when she brought the kits out, you know, and she was the one who would slowly bring them closer to me, and I just stayed still in the same spot. So I think that, especially with my experience in foxes, if you develop their trust and you gain their trust, it ends up being so much more rewarding than just trying to walk right up to them and do all that. And that's actually how I ended up getting this photo. I gained this fox's trust. So.
I see. Yeah. So this is such a strong message to photographers, is that by getting their trust and let them come to you, right? And it is so difficult though, because we all want to get closer and closer and closer, right? And these days there are more and more like even wide angle photos and all too. So it is just so difficult, but it's so much more rewarding, and also better for the wellness of the animals if we give them space, and then when they trust us, they come to us, right?
Yeah, it is really difficult because it's difficult to have patience, especially in the field of photography. But I just think that, I don't know, I just think that gaining the trust is just the most important thing, and it can take an hour, or it could take a week, or it could take a month, or even a year. You know, it just depends on where you're photographing it and what your subject is. But I mean, when I spent time photographing the fox den for my senior project, every single day I was there, and the more time I spent there, the more behavior the kids showed to me. So at first they were just poking their heads out. And then a few more of them came out, and then they were playing together, and then they were walking up to the side of the road and looking at me and tilting their heads. And then the parents would come by my car because they were comfortable with my car being there. So I just think it takes time, but it's really rewarding.
Yeah, and then you can get close like that. I really like this one because the whole image is very warm, but then you see the snow on the snout, and then I love the snow on the snout. If you don't know by now, so it's yeah, and then the lines and the light and shadow is all beautiful in this one too.
Thank you. Yeah, this is one of my favorite photos. I took it in 2014, and how old was I? My 12-year-old self was freaking out about this photo because as I explained, I was really excited to finally be able to get closer to foxes because I was never able to do that. And my dream was to get a shot in the frame of just the fox and nothing else in the background, like just the fox without cropping it. And this isn't cropped at all. I didn't even crop it a little bit. A part of me is a little bit bummed about the ear, but I don't really mind that anymore. But I took this photo at Island Beach State Park in New Jersey. And unfortunately, that is where a lot of people feed the foxes. So right down the road, there would be other foxes just eating all of the goldfish that this little kid is pouring out the side of the window. And I don't really agree with feeding foxes at all because I think it just disrupts their behavioral patterns and their hunting patterns, and they start to rely on people more than needed. But for that photo, I just sat on the side of the road, and the fox ended up coming up to me because he wanted food. So that's really the only reason why it came up to me. But at least I ended up getting a nice photo out of it. But
yeah, I see, got it. Yeah, I think it is quite sad when you see that the animal's behavior was changed by human, right? Because it's just the basic instinct. They can resist the food, and when people start feeding them, and then they come closer to the road, and then eventually it will just lead to their death, right? So yeah. So
yeah, a lot of them had to.
Do you first self-learn photography, or do you have some mentors who influence you?
At first, I kind of taught myself, and then I developed I got a lot of mentors. I had a lot of help.
Yeah.
I mean, Melissa Grew has been one of my mentors since I was like 9 years old.
Really?
I was friends with her on social media. She came to my house. We photographed together. She doesn't live too far from me. She's from New York, and I'm from New Jersey. And she's been such a big supporter of me, and I just admire her so much, and I look up to her, and she's still like my mentor to this day. You know?
Yeah, Miss Melissa.
10 years later.
Yeah.
I can't believe I've known her for that long. But Sherb Nolte and Henry Holdsworth were two of my other mentors from the very beginning. And they're still like good friends of mine to this day. So
I see. Yeah, I met Henry actually. I was photographing a great gray owl in Tetons, and he was right next to me. And then we started talking.
That's where you'll find Henry.
Yeah, and he was like the nicest guy I've ever met. He was so friendly and was so knowledgeable. And later I realized that he has a gallery there.
Well, one question that I think is really a pretty good question from our friend Maria Serrano. She wanted to know who Ashleigh goes out with on her photography outings to feel safe, because Maria feels this is a big obstacle for female photographers to be out shooting by themselves alone. So she wanted to know, how does Ashleigh deal with that situation?
Yeah, personally, I try not to photograph alone, but it's usually when I know I'll be getting out of my car and like walking somewhere or hiking somewhere, because there are just like safety regulations too, just being alone in general, rather than just being like a girl alone. But I spent a lot of time in my upbringing going out with my dad, who would help carry the tripod. But sometimes I'd go out with my mentors. You know, I have some friends that I'll go out and shoot with too, especially out in Wyoming. And when I was at the Summit Workshops last September, I had two of my friends there, and Carolina and Emma, and we went out shooting together a lot and went hiking back in the refuge. to look for things, but my advice would be that if you're gonna go hike or gonna go walk somewhere alone, like in an isolated area, that you would bring somebody with you, you know, just in case you lose something, or for any other reasons that will remain unspoken. But
maybe somebody you can run faster than in case there's a bear or something.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think photographers are actually in danger when we go to the wilderness, not because of the animals sometimes, but they're just some skittish people in the wilderness. I had a friend who went out to photograph foxes, and you know, we always shoot until after sunset, right? And at the time he was alone, and he just went to fill the gas at a gas station, but it was kind of in a remote area. And then there was a drunk guy asking him to fill up a huge bottle for the gas, and it was probably he needed at least $50 to fill that, so he refused. And then the guy came back with like a 2-meter long metal stick trying to hit him or something. So yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I mean, this kind of things can happen, and right now I carry pepper spray, but still I think it is better to go with at least one more friend to just be safe, right?
Yeah, and based off stories that I've heard too and read, it never ends up going well if you end up alone. And I think that the worst part about going out and hiking alone, based off my experience, is getting lost. Like especially out in Wyoming when I go and hike, you know, there's no service. You don't have any service, and you don't know where you're going, and there's not necessarily always paths. Or if there are paths, they're going in a million different directions because they're hunter's paths or bridle paths or anything like that. And getting lost, especially if you're going out like at dusk, you don't really want to try and find your way back in the dark. So
yeah, that is true. I have that the Lomi thing, you know, the walkie-talkie thing that has satellite signals where you pay like $50 a month, and then you can send like distress signals to Facebook to locate your GPS location for people to save you or something. I think that is actually a good investment, but I've never used it for help. Fortunately, one of the question is what is your approach to convey a story in your picture? Like how do you, does the moment create a story, or do you go in a particular area and wait for the picture to happen?
It could be a little bit of both. I mean, using the owl nests that I photographed in May as an example, I think once I knew that the nest was there and I went and I kind of got an understanding of the environment that the great horned owls were in, and there was such a vast difference from where the great horned owls fledged to where the barred owls fledged when it comes to the trees and just even the span of time, because great horned owls, of course, are one of the largest owls in North America, and their owlets need a lot more time in the nest to grow and get bigger in order to fledge, whereas the barred owls fledge a lot earlier. So I think that it's important to know the behavior of the animal and kind of know what's going to happen 3 steps ahead, rather than being surprised and then missing the shot or something like that, which has happened to me more times than I can count. But I do think that that is what's most important. But when it comes to conveying a story, I find that family subjects like a brown bear sow and her cub, or a mother fox and her kit, I think that that's the best way to get empathy out of people towards the subject, whether it's a subject like a grizzly bear that has a very negative perception from society. You know, when I have pictures,
let me go to that photo. Right?
When I have pictures of cubs hugging their mother's faces when they're playing tag on the beach, like that's my perception of grizzly bears, and that's the one that I want to be able to spread to everybody else. And this is one of my favorite photos because this was highly honored in Wildlife Photographer of the Year. And out of all the photos that I've submitted into competitions, this one had the most positive impact. And this one surprised people so much just by the way the bears were behaving. People were coming up to me and asking me about my experiences with them. And it just had such a positive impact. And it meant so much to me because my experience with these bears was unreal. And like I was invisible in their environment and I was photographing them as if I wasn't even there. And I just think that it's so important that that's what people need to see. Like you need to be immersed into the animal's environment and kind of be invisible and have them trust you and be comfortable with you in order to get what you need to convey the story. Because for me, there's more of a story when the animal's acting naturally rather than when it isn't. But I do think conservation wise that stories when animals aren't acting naturally are very important too. For example, like a bear crossing the road, like a bear and its cubs looking really nervous crossing the road with a bunch of people in the background, like that image tells the story automatically. You can tell by the way the bear is behaving that it's so alarmed and frightened by the amount of people around it, and it's on a road. You know, so I think both can have positive impacts, and I do think that animals behaving unnaturally can tell a pretty good story too, but a lot of my focus is photos like this.
I see. Yeah, and I really like this photo, not just because of the moment of sharing the mother's love, which kind of contradicts a lot of common beliefs that bears are scary, they are fierce and all, right? They have the tender side, but I also like your attention to details, to like the 4 feet, there's no overlap, and then this feet is up, this feet is up, you know, and then all the moments, and with the mouth open, with the cub showing like the joy and happiness, right? And then the mother was just like trying to head bump the cub with this pose. Is just really well captured. So yeah, so congratulations for that one.
Thank you. I do think that, you know, when people hear of like other people getting attacked by a bear or something, I'd say, I mean, I've read Mark of the Grizzly, I've read Death in Yellowstone, like I know all about all of the most famous bear attacks and everything. And I'd say 80 to 90% of them are because the mother was protecting the cubs that were either on the other side of the hikers or bikers or whoever unintentionally, or she got separated from them, or there was some form of miscommunication where the mother felt like the cubs were threatened. And that's usually what causes these misunderstandings and unfortunate incidents. But I just think that showing the bond between a mother and the cub can also explain why they can flip the switch so quickly and try and protect them.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I'm guessing that a human would do, like a mother would do the same for her child.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, that's so well said. I think having the opportunity to go to those places and watch them closely and photograph them allow us to really explain like what is really going on. Like when you spend so much time there photographing these, and then when you see the news, you know that there's nothing the mother bear can do, because it's like the basic instinct, right? When they felt the threat, they have to attack first, because they couldn't care. They have to protect the babies, right? And in Alaska, you know that, right? When a male bear came close, the mother bear didn't have a chance, right? So they had to use the full strength to attack first. And the only thing they want to do, the mother bear wanted to do, is just to injure the male bear so that they wouldn't risk getting injured, because they kind of lost their own capability, right? So that's the first step the mother bear is gonna do, and it's in nature for all these years. So that's the first response when they get scared by the hikers, is also that, and they haven't thought about, is that a human or is that what? They only felt the threat, and the immediate response is to attack fiercely, right? So
yeah, I mean, that's just their natural instinct.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and they have a right to feel that way too. That is my opinion, but
yeah. So so now talking about photo techniques and all. So if you go back to your 8-year-old self, like for a lot of the beginning photographers who want to get into this, and I know, like I was talking to Donald the other day too, actually a lot of photographers, they want to do something for conservation and all. So what would be like the one advice you give them when they begin in terms of like taking photos? Like I know it's kind of difficult. So it doesn't matter if you have more than one tip. Say, what would you have done differently, or what would you advise them to pay attention to in the beginning?
I think that a lot of people believe and think that getting a photo of a close-up of an animal's face is what's most important. And I thought that too. And I think that over time I learned that capturing an animal in their environment and connecting with other species of wildlife or connecting with their own young, I find is really important. And I just think that being able to combine that and tell a story, you don't have to do that right off the bat. But I think that it took me a while to develop my own style of photography and find out what aspect of wildlife photography I really enjoyed. And the one that was most important into changing any negative perceptions and changing people's minds. And I think that trying all aspects of photography is really important too. You know, whether it's landscape or there's animalscapes, which are an animal in their environment from super far away. I mean, I've taken wide angles of animalscapes before, and I tried macro. I was supposed to try underwater. And I mean, there are just so many different types that you can try. I did an independent study my junior year in high school where I went back to film and I developed some photos just because I always get comments asking if I've done it before, and I wanted to learn more about it and see what it was like. But I think just seeing what you really like and kind of discovering the aspect of photography that you really want to pursue, I think that would be the way to go.
Yeah, I think, but a lot of people get confused about going from a close-up photo of a portrait to photos with more habitat. Means that all they need is just to use a shorter focal length and include more habitat. In my opinion, I think it is getting the habitat to work in a harmony with the animal is actually much more challenging, because you have to look for the lines and the whole composition and the texture of the background and everything, so that it actually helps instead of distracting the viewers from the eyes of that. So it actually takes much more time, but then once it works, it's gonna be better. So I think right now there are three kinds of photographers. God, I'm going to upset a lot of people. But I think one is people who get super into those wide angle thing, like they try to lure them in and then get like a distorted big nose animals and all impactful photo, right? That is one. The other one is like just long lens and close-ups. The third one is have like really nice habitat, maybe smaller in the frame. And I don't know about you, but my all-time favorite photo is actually Tom Mangelson's photo of the polar bear with the Arctic fox. I don't know if you know that one with the wind sweeping, snow field and all. And I think that one was the meaning of how habitat can work with the animal and tells a story about how the polar bear and the Arctic fox they were kind of working together, right? The Arctic fox will probably eat the remaining food of the polar bear, and then the photo captured the moment when the Arctic fox has the mouth open too. And then on the left of the photo, it was really blue, cold, and then on the right hand side is the sun glowing. So the whole photo is just in beautiful harmony. And the other day I was talking to my friend Paul McKinsey, and surprisingly, he said that was also his all-time favorite too. So I think that is aligned with what you mentioned about. So for those of you who don't know the link, I'll post the link later on the photo. So I think that is what the meaning of instead of trying to get super close, right? By getting out, but wait for the moment when all these lines and textures and curves and everything, and the color and everything comes together, and with the nice interaction, just like what you said, right? The interaction, like the mother and the baby, or these two different species, right? Kind of depends on each other, and then you get a photo. Then it really is the most powerful one. So, yeah. So because I saw quite a lot of people who just said, oh, I want to include more habitat, but the habitat doesn't really helps the photo. And then when they didn't get the response that they wanted, and then they tend to give up. So which is very sad, right? But if they can have a more engaging habitat, I think that actually helps the photos more. But I think this we can talk for 3 hours about different examples. So that maybe we wait for some future talks on that.
Oh, here's a good one. Charles Jansen asked, are your photos all taken on public lands? And if not, how do you arrange permission to go on private lands?
So a majority of my photos have been taken on public lands, and the ones that I have taken on private lands, I've been working with some organizations. So when I went to private lands, I was with the Teton Cougar Project, who were doing research on the local mountain lion population in the Jackson Hole area. So they had a bunch of research, and they got permission from the owners that way and through their organization. And the other way I've gotten through private lands was through the Teton Raptor Center, when they would go to track the little backpacks and satellite packs on the great gray owls in the area. So all of the access I've gotten to private lands has been research-based, and for other causes that I was just kind of tagging along and documenting. But as far as getting access to private lands, if you know that a specific subject is spending a lot of time in one area, I mean, what I would do is I would just write a letter to the owner of the house and just kindly ask permission. I mean, based off experience, not everybody is going to allow you permission on their property. Sometimes they don't even allow the researchers access. But I'd say just to try that. I mean, I don't usually try and get on private lands, mainly because a lot of the people just won't allow it. But I mean, maybe writing a letter would help. But the only way I've gotten into them was for research.
Got it. So
can I add something on to that? Just a suggestion. Something that's worked for me is whenever I've had to get on a private land, I always offer the owner of the private land copies of the images that I take.
Yeah, that too.
I just want to add that. Sorry, I'll be quiet.
That's a great idea. Yeah. So quite a lot of people ask you, Ashleigh, what equipment are you using now?
So I use a Canon 5D Mark IV, and I do have the Canon 500 f4 millimeter lens, and I love that lens. But I'd say my go-to would be the 100 to 400, mainly because it isn't fixed, and that way I can go from a close-up to an animal scape, or it's so adjustable, instead of just like taking the 500 off and then throwing on like a 400 or something like that. But the Canon 5D Mark IV and my 100 to 400 millimeter are my go-tos.
So are you more of a tripod person or handheld person, photographer? Can you handhold, you handhold a 500?
For a lot of people who know me, they have seen me take every opportunity not to use a tripod. And in times it has benefited me in the best ways possible, but other times it has just not. And I mean, I spent a lot of time in Prince Edward Island just balancing the 500 on my knees. And with a lot of practice, you get better at it. You just can't really breathe. You kind of just have to like hold your breath and remain as motionless as possible. I'm a big fan of the tripod. It's just a lot if you have to go onto a long hike.
Oh yeah.
It's a lot to carry. And yeah, that's the only reason why I wouldn't bring the tripod. I do use it as much as possible. In some cases, it's very necessary. I just learned how to take pictures of the stars during the summit workshops. And I mean, there's just no option but to use a tripod in that case.
Oh yeah.
Just because of your shutter speed and everything. But I also think it depends on the time of day and what shutter speed that you have, because sometimes you can get away with hand holding something if you have a high shutter speed. But you know, if you're photographing at dusk, it's not as promising to not bring the tripod. But I find if you're photographing in the morning, if it's just getting lighter out, your shutter speed's just going to get higher. So you kind of have just a better chance. But I kind of just bring it based off of instinct, whether or not I think it's a good idea.
Okay, that's fantastic. Okay, so Jesse asked, well, I think we kind of covered that, but maybe you can say a few more words. But you have a few more minutes, right, Ashleigh?
Yeah.
Okay, so she said she want to learn how you capture so much emotion and connection with the animal in your photographs.
Well, I'd go back to talking about trust and just remaining invisible in the environment. And For people who are trying to photograph in urban neighborhoods like I have most of my life, I do recommend the camouflage tent. It is very helpful. The animal mostly has no idea that you're there. They know something's going on, but they don't know what it is. And I recommend just turning the silent shutter on because that's always beneficial. But
Do you go by yourself when you are on that tent?
yeah, when I'm in the tent, I'm by myself. And I've only really used the tent in New Jersey when I'm photographing fox dens.
Wow.
Occasionally I use it for owls, but it kind of just depends. Usually if I do use it for owls, it'll be when I'm photographing owls in a nest box, just so I'm not disturbing them. But yeah, I just go back to trust and remaining invisible in the environment and just patience and just kind of looking for opportunities where you think you'd be able to tell a story.
When you are in that camouflage thing, are you more afraid of seeing other humans, or are you more?
Some people walk by and kind of are a little curious as to what's going on. But besides that, I mean, I don't really I try not to pay attention to who's walking by and just what's going on in front of me.
But before we end this, let me ask you, so what would be the best way for people to connect with you or ask you more questions in the future? Is it better in Instagram or Facebook? Or
I am not a big Facebook person. I try and stay updated on it. I do have about 600 requests that are still pending on my Facebook.
So they can follow you on Instagram though.
Connect with me on Instagram, DM me. I'm always answering the DMs. I'm trying to post more. I just need more content. But yeah, Instagram sometimes, or actually it helps a lot if you email me through my website too.
Okay, your website. Okay.
I answer those. I've been very, very on top of my emails since college started. I used to be very bad at answering emails, but now I don't really have a choice because the NCAA requires me to check my email at least once a day.
Oh, really?
So
wow.
I've been very on top of that now, but Instagram, DM, and email.
Okay.
And if you need my email, then I can also put that in the chat or something like that.
Oh yeah. I think that would be good. And I think you guys can easily Google Ashleigh Scully, and then she can have the
that's the best email to reach me at.
Okay. Okay, awesome. So they asked, like, what brand of Camo tents do you use?
Yes, I saw that. I use this one.
Oh.
Right here.
Oh, which?
Let me see if I can read it.
Sportsman.
It's like a guide gear. 4-panel spring steel. It's almost like a hunting blind, but it's not. But yeah, I mean, I got it so many years ago. So
I see.
I mean, I bet there's so many different brands out now that are better.
Does Ashleigh shoot in burst mode or single shot?
So I switch back and forth. It depends on the subject that I'm shooting. If the subject is moving or flying, then obviously I use burst mode. But if I have an owl on a branch that's stationary and I want to save space in my memory card, then I switch to single shot.
Here's a really good question. Ashleigh, have you taken Tin Man's course on sharp photography?
What is that question?
Bob asked that.
No, I haven't. I should.
Well, you don't need to take that anyways, but thanks, Bob, for helping me to promote that. You have been competing, right, since you were, what, 5 years old? Or
yeah, so in my equestrian world, I've been riding since I was 4. So it was kind of my passion before photography. But I love it, and a part of me thinks that it's also the connection with animals there that also just like relates to photography. But yeah, I love it. And I'm so glad that I get to pursue it in college and still be able to balance school, photography, and riding. So
so were you always like that, like where you know what you want in your life? Because it seems like you started the horse riding, the photography, and then you based on your interests and your talents, and now you picked English because you want to write. And so was it because of the influence from your parents and they gave you a lot of freedom to do that, or you knew exactly what you wanted?
I think a part of me has always known what I've wanted to do. I mean, some people think that like I have it all figured out, and I promise you I do not at all. I'm still learning. I'm still like finding my way and still seeing exactly what I want to do. But I think I've just acknowledged what I'm really good at and focus on that. And luckily I was just able to find what I was good at from a young age when it comes to both writing and photography. So I think that just kind of pursuing what you love is really important too. Like you don't have to be amazing at everything. You know, like I started off with a lime green point and shoot Olympus camera and worked really hard.
Yeah.
And paid for all of my gear and paid for most of my trips. And I spent a lot of that time like doing it alone. Like I was flying to Prince Edward Island alone. I was flying to London alone. I was doing a lot of it myself. And I'm very grateful to my parents who were able to support me through all of that and trust me. But I'm also very independent. And so flying and traveling alone has always just been what I'd prefer.
So what is the worst experience in your wildlife photography? Because people always see that you're winning awards and getting all the recognition and all, but when I hear your stories about you're spending 5 hours a day waiting for the moments and all these things, I bet there must be a lot of tough times, right? So can you share like one of them, like what is the most disappointing or frustrating ones?
There's definitely been a lot of trial and error. Most of the times that I've spent an extensive amount of time waiting for a subject, it's ended up working out. So I haven't had any bad experience with that necessarily. But I mean, I've had some pretty like scary moments too. I'd say most of, oh, here's a trial and error. I was in British Columbia and I have this syndrome in my hands and my feet called Raynaud's where my blood circulation gets cut off in the cold. So my hands react really badly and I start to not be able to feel them and it gets really bad. So I had these huge gloves on. And I had actually just saved up enough money for the Canon 1DX. So I was just using it. It was a new body. It was the first time I was using it. I didn't really know what all the buttons did yet. And I hit a button with the huge mitten when I didn't know it that converted all the photos that I took after that to JPEG.
Oh, there's such a button. Who invented that button? I didn't even know.
It was quite the disappointment, especially because that was one of the best mornings we had of the whole trip, photographing loons on this lake. Like beautiful light, their chicks on their backs, and everything was in JPEG. And I was just like, you know. But I mean, it happens to everybody. I'm certainly going to make sure it doesn't happen again. But yeah.
Oh, I see. So how is your condition now? Are your fingers and all better now? Or
I mean, they're better because I'm in Texas and it's very hot outside. But when I ski, I have battery powered gloves and I have these batteries that have wires that run through my ski boots and I can like control the temperature.
I see. Cool. Yeah. Okay.
But yeah. So.
That is great. Wow. Okay, so that button.
That was probably the biggest disappointment. I mean, I've had my little scary encounters too.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was this phase I went through when I was like 12 or 13 where I just hated having any like excess photos in my memory card, like on the camera. So let's say, or this actually happened. So I was photographing a fox den in Wyoming. And one of the photos that I took actually was highly honored in Wildlife Photographer of the Year as well. But during this day and this shoot, I erased every single photo I took besides which ones I thought. And I would all narrow them down to less than 5 and I would take thousands. And I'd be sitting in the back of the car, deleting every single one right off the camera, which means I'm not going to get them back, which was just stupid. But I was just obsessed with like just being able to look at my best ones for that day instead of going through and, you know, and then I got my Canon 5D Mark IV, which lets me rate it from the back of the camera. So when I upload them, I can automatically sort them, which was a game changer. But that was a mistake. You know, I still don't know what photos could have become of the ones that were deleted, but I don't recommend doing that ever.
Yeah. So how about now? Do you still delete the photos you don't like after each trip, or do you just rate them like 5 stars, 1 stars, and then keep everything?
So my laptop is very much running out of space. I keep the ones that I've rated, but all of the other ones where either the settings are messed up or the subject is not pink or blurry or looking in the wrong direction, or the composition is messed up, or it's just a test shot, then I'll just delete those. But I just need to back everything up onto hard drives because I just don't have enough space on my laptop anymore. But
so anyway, so I want to end this with one question I think Susan asked, which is, so what is your plan for the next few years, like 5 years or something? Do you have any plan or goals or anything like that?
Well, my goal right now is to probably be able to travel again, actually travel. I'm going to end up being at home for breaks and stuff. So hopefully I'll be able to get out and shoot then. I'm hoping to get some internships during the summer and go out and work for some people. Whether or not it's like one of my mentors or an organization or something like that. I just hope to keep developing my style and aspects of photography and just stay on the same track that I'm on. And as far as careers, I'm not entirely sure yet. I mean, I think being a writer is kind of what I'm set on right now. And, you know, hopefully like publishing a book with some of my photos in it and kind of stories from the field would be a fun idea that I could work on in the free time that I currently don't have, but I will get on that. But hopefully the way I see myself in 5 years, that I'm graduated, I competed on the team, on the equestrian team here, and that I'm still on the same track that I'm on right now.
I see. So probably,
that's my hope.
Travel, being a writer, and then do some scuba diving photography and do some,
I love to do that.
And then also wildlife photography, and then try to also help with the conservation, right? So everything seems to be working well. Yeah, well, so good luck for the college, and thank you so much, Ashleigh, for your time. I know you're super busy, and I'm so honored to finally be able to talk to you in depth for this.
Oh, thank you, and thank you so much for this opportunity. This was so much fun. I hope to do it again.